Good afternoon and welcome to our first Simon Proud Expert Insights. We'll give it a few minutes just to have a few more people join, and then we'll continue the presentation with Professor Roet-Green. Perfect, I think that looks, the counter slowing down. Okay, well, we're excited to launch this new series of faculty webinars. My name is Alex Sylvester. I'm a 2011 full-time MBA graduate, and I join you virtually from the Bay Area. As a proud member of the Simon Alumni Board, I am pleased to be hosting the session today. We are thrilled to have you and to offer you this talk. So it is my pleasure to introduce Professor Ricky Roet-Green. Professor Roet-Green received a PhD in operational research from the School of Mathematics at Tel Aviv University in 2014. Before joining Simon Business School, she spent 2 years as a postdoc at the University of Toronto. Her research insights lie in modeling and analyzing the behavior of strategic customers in congestion-prone environments, particularly in service systems. Her work integrates queuing theory, game theory, and mechanism design, aiming to optimize system performance in terms of revenue and social welfare maximization. On a personal note, Simon has always had a strong academics, and this is driven by our outstanding intellectual capital of our faculty. So I'm honored to present your questions to Professor Roet-Green. As a reminder, please utilize the Q&A box to submit any questions, and they'll be addressed at the end of the presentation. Professor, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for joining the talk. So today I'm going to talk about Uber, TSA, and Snowbird on designing differentiated services as a tool for maximizing performance. Okay, so I think Alex said it all already, so you already know who I am. I joined Simon in 2015, and I'm here since then. Let me just jump and say a little bit more about my research interests. So I'm interested in operations management. I'm an assistant professor of operations management at Simon. Mainly I'm interested in service systems, queuing theory, game theory, mechanism design, and business analytics. And to be more specific, I'm just gonna talk about my research today, which is very much has to do with queuing. So why queuing? The main reason is that time is money, as we all know. And because time is money, I don't want to spend it too much. I really care about my time. I appreciate it a lot. So this is why I'm so interested in queuing and in minimizing waiting times. What am I interested about the most is strategic queuing. And what do I mean by strategic queuing? So when we talk about strategic queuing, we talk about, first of all, a provider, a service manager. And this service manager very much cares about maximizing performance. And by performance, I mean profit, revenue. I'll mainly talk about revenue today, and also social welfare. So when we talk about public providers, they care about social welfare, or in other words, minimizing the overall waiting time in their system. We also have customers, of course, and these customers are rational, which means that they aim to maximize their utility in the system. Now, the thing is that these customers also have to stand up in line many times and wait to be served, and they don't like to wait. To deal with these kind of problems, what I do is that I combine several types of theories. So strategic queuing is mainly queuing theory, which deals with or models the dynamics of the queue. Game theory looks at the behavior of customers in the queue, and mechanism design asks the questions of optimizing the service from the perspective of the manager or the service provider. What's the customer dilemma here? So the very basic dilemma is, of course, when a new customer arrives to the system or to the queue, observe the queue or don't observe the queue, doesn't matter. This customer needs to decide whether to join the queue or to leave. If the customer decides to join, maybe at some point he decides to abandon the queue. That's also a possibility. So that's the very simple setting. We can have a more complicated setting. And in this more complicated setting, as we can see here, we have multiple queues. And now the question is not just whether to join or leave, but also the question is which queue to join. And if you look at the system, maybe most of you would say, okay, join the shortest queue. So you want to join this second queue here. But sometimes that's not really the case because we might have a priority queue here. Maybe the last queue that looks the longest actually is going to get prioritized over the others. So you would definitely consider joining this queue. There can be also other cases where you have differentiated services, which means that we have different servers in front of each queue. Each server can have its own quality of service, maybe different service rate. Customers also can be different from each other. They can differ with respect to their value of service, with respect to their needs, with respect to the way they value their time. So we take all this into consideration when we model problems in a strategic queuing. And in this talk, what I'm going to do is to talk about 3 types of differentiated services that I tackled in my papers in the last several years. The first would be an expedited service. Second, we're going to talk about prioritizing customers. And I hope I'll have enough time to talk about quality differentiated services at the end. So let's start from the first topic. The first question that we are asking is how to minimize flyers waiting at airport security check lines. And this is based on a work with my PhD student, Aditya Shetty. He's a student here at Simon Business School, soon to be graduated. So what is the motivation? This work is motivated by the TSA PreCheck service. TSA PreCheck was launched in 2011, and TSA had in mind the goal of minimizing waiting times at the security checks at airports. Since then, we know that the waiting time for TSA PreCheck customers' flyers is very short compared to other flyers, to the standard flyers. They have many members, over 10 million members in the program. And it's available in many airports, over 200 airports all over the US, all across the US. So how does it work? I'm sure many of you are familiar with that, but let me just explain to those who are not. You need to apply online if you want to become a member of TSA PreCheck. You apply online and then you are asked to come to an in-person meeting. And in this in-person meeting, you are going to be interviewed, your fingerprints are going to be taken. And if you are approved, you can enjoy TSA PreCheck for the next 5 years. The payment currently is $85 for 5 years. What does it give you? So it gives you a faster service at the airport, except from the dedicated line that you have. You also have a faster service because you don't have to take off your shoes or your laptops out of the suitcase. Liquids also can stay in the suitcase. You don't have to take off your belts or your jackets. So overall, the service is much faster. Motivated by this example and by other examples like Nexus, other services, Nexus and Global Entry, we are modeling our setting as follows. So we are going to have a one-time enrollment fee that pays over multiple uses. So customers pay once, make the effort once, and then they can use it several times throughout a period of time, a period of 5 years. The pre-processing is exactly what makes it faster to serve the enrolled customers, right? We screen them before they arrive to the airport. We have enough information so we can let them go faster through the security check. It's also a mandatory service. Unfortunately, we all have to stand in these lines. We cannot avoid them. If we want to travel, if we want to take a flight, we have to go through security. And the fee, and this is a very important thing to keep in mind, the fee is used to pay for outsourced screening. So this is what TSA are saying everywhere. They are not using this money as revenue. This money is paid for the $85 that you pay is paid for outsourcing the screening. So there's no revenue coming into TSA pockets from TSA PreCheck service. So with that in mind, the objective that we are going to have here is to reduce congestion and not to increase revenue. Okay, so what is the research question that we are going to ask here? So first, I'm going to ask about research allocation. How should a welfare maximizing service provider allocate resources to an expedited service? Assuming that we want to try and add this option of an expedited service, how much of the resources that we have right now should be allocated to this expedited service? And the other question is the question of fairness. Under what conditions would the additional welfare, not come at the expense of any customers? And this is actually an important question to ask. When TSA PreCheck was first launched, TSA was criticized by many customers, flyers that were standing in the standard lines, that they are actually now have to wait longer because of this new service that TSA launched. And we want to check if this is really the case. Can we improve that? If that's the case, what can we do about it? Keeping in mind that we want to make sure that this new service doesn't come at the expense of some of our customers. Okay, so let's see how we model this. So we start from a standard service, one service, just a regular security line. And it has its resources. And what we are going to do, this is the resources, by the way, this green circle here. And this is what we model as a queue. That's what we use to illustrate a queue. So now we take the resources and we are going to reallocate them into two services, a standard service and an expedited service. And we are going to split the capacity, the resources between those two services. And the question is how to do it. So to answer the question, we need also to model the customers or the flyers. So we are going to simplify, and this is one of the things that we do in research all the time. So in order to answer questions, we take them and we try to find the simplest model possible that can really give us insights about the problem that we can really learn from, but we can still work with, because what I'm not showing you here, and I'm not going to show you here in this talk, I'm not going to show you all the math behind it. Okay, there's a lot of math. It's not that easy, but we are trying to find the simplest model that can still work for us and help us understand what's going on. So we are going to talk about two types of flyers, frequent flyers and occasional flyers. And the one thing that we start from by modeling is to understand that frequent flyers have higher incentive to enroll to the program. And this is because, of course, they are going to use the service much more times, many more times. So what are we doing with that? We are first asking the question, who will enroll? So to answer the question, think about this line here, okay? The line here represents the allocation to the expedited service. So we start from 0. 0 means there's no allocation to the expedited service. We only offer a standard service. 1 means that we are now allocating all the resources to the expedited service. So we only have an expedited service. And in between, we have this mix between those two services. So in between, we offer both services. So let's see what customers or flyers are going to do when we start moving and allocating some of our capacity towards the expedited service. So at the beginning, when we just move a little bit of allocation, a little bit of resources, nobody will enroll. And why is that? It's because this allocation is not enough. The resources for the expedited service are not enough to justify moving there. Waiting time there is going to be terrible. We're going to wait there forever. I don't want to do that. I don't want to enroll if you don't give me enough resources for this type of service. But if we continue and allocate more resources to the expedited service, we're going to see customers, flyers starting to enroll. And first, we are going to see those frequent flyers joining and enrolling to the program. So they will enroll and enroll. Okay, you see here, it goes up the line. So more customers are enrolling until we get to the point, which is this point here, where all the high users, the frequent flyers, are now enrolled into the program. And now we still need more allocation of resources to the expedited service in order to have more customers join, more customers enroll. So here we also have the occasional customers join and enroll, and at some point we'll move enough capacity, enough resources for this expedited service that everybody are just going to be there and enrolled to the program. I'm sorry, I just realized that I wrote in both sides only standard and only standard. So no, this is only standard, this is only expedited. I hope it's not the same in the next slides, but we'll fix that if that's the case. Okay, maximize social welfare. We said that this is our goal. What do I mean by social welfare? Social welfare is basically the same as customers' utility. So we look at all customers in the system, and we want to make sure that we are maximizing the utilities of everybody. In our case, what does it mean? In our case, it means minimizing overall costs. And what do I mean by overall costs? So overall waiting costs and overall enrollment fees. These are the things that we are considering as costs. So now let's go back to this graph that I showed you and ask the question, what would be an optimal solution in terms of social welfare here? So, here is the first solution. The first solution is only standard, which means that we are not offering the expedited service at all. And the other optional solution is we offer just the expedited service. So these are the two options. But we can actually have another two types of solution, which are intermediate solutions. So one of them is here. If you remember, this point is exactly the point where I allocate enough resources such that I have all my frequent flyers enrolled to the program. And then, and this is interesting, there's another option for some model parameters, and depends on the situation. It can be the case that you actually optimize or find the maximum social welfare if you push a little bit more resources towards the expedited service. And before I move on, I just want to explain that, okay? Just explain the trade-off between resources allocation and those movements of customers from one queue to another, from one service to another. So think about the standard service and the expedited service. This is their resources right now. And what you see here, those blue rectangles represent the number of customers that are enrolled. And now we move some resources from the standard service to the expedited service. With that movement of, when we move that resource, we also move some of the customers with it. And the reason for that is that those customers now see, okay, the expedited service gets more capacity, I'm encouraged to enroll. Who is going to be affected by that? So, except from those customers who move, I'll talk about them in a second, we have also the remaining, those who remain in the standard service. So those who remain in the standard service are actually also benefiting from those customers who leave, because now they have a shorter queue. Yes, they have less resources, but also a shorter queue. This can be balanced. Maybe they gain, maybe they don't lose. So that's exactly the question that we're going to ask in a second. Of course, those who enrolled after seeing the capacity move to the other queue, to the expedited service, they benefit from it, of course. And also those who are in the expedited queue already, they are also affected by it, because with the capacity came more customers came into the queue, and therefore maybe they are going to wait longer. So these are the kind of questions that we need to ask. And now I'm going to ask the question, is it fair? So I'm going to look at these 4 solutions that I showed you, and I'm going to check each one of them and ask if it's fair. So if you are only going to have a standard service and you are not going to offer the expedited service, yes, it's fair to everybody. Everybody have to wait in the same line. That's okay. Also, if you allocate capacity resources to the expedited service, just such that your frequent flyers are now enrolled, but not more than that, this is also fair, because it doesn't come at the expense of those occasional customers that are still waiting in the standard line. What about the other 2 solutions? So here the answer is not always. And also here, the answer is not always. It depends. It depends on the queue parameters, on the model parameters. And why not always? Because what is happening here is that we gave more resources to the expedited service, and nobody enrolled because of that, right? Compared to this point here, we move more resources, and we don't get more customers to move with those resources. So at the end, yes, overall social welfare, overall waiting time is reduced. Why is that? It's because those customers that are waiting in the expedited service are now being served even faster, because the waiting time is even, right? The waiting time is going to be shorter because they are served even faster. But those customers who are waiting in the standard queue are now maybe losing because of this. Also, the situation where we force everybody to enroll to the expedited service. So we might think that this is a good idea, maybe even think about let's subsidize, let's make it zero cost for our flyers, so everybody will enroll. But the thing is that it's never free. There's always an effort that comes with the enrollment, always a process. There are always, by the way, flyers that cannot be pre-processed, tourists and others for their own reasons. So if we force them to go through that pre-processing, we are actually maybe decreasing their social welfare. What can we do about it? How can we make it fair? So there are 2 options. The first option that I just talked about is reducing enrollment fee that we can consider. The other thing that a provider can consider is to increase efficiency of the expedited service. And we checked these 2 options, and we came to the conclusion that increasing efficiency improves the fairness, but reducing enrollment fee does not. And the reason for that is that in the cases that I showed you, who is going to enjoy this reduction in fee? It's basically those who are already enrolled. So it doesn't help those who stay in the standard service. Okay, so this is for this topic. If you're interested in this topic and you want to read more, I'm just going to show you the paper here. So the paper was published in Operations Research Journal in this is not Operations Research. This is a forthcoming paper. This is going to be published in MSOM, Manufacturing and Service Operations Management, in the next month, actually. So it's a new paper, and you are welcome to read it. Alex, are there any questions from the audience so far?
Hi, Professor. No questions so far. I think everyone's just listening.
Yeah, is there anyone here that wanna ask anything right now? No, I'm glad that it was so clear. If you have more questions about this, we can answer at the end as well. Okay?
Perfect.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, so let's continue. Now I'm going to ask the second question. And the second question is how to maximize revenue by prioritizing skiers. This is based on a joint work with the professors Philippe Afesh, Ofer Baron, and Joseph Milner from the Rotman School of Management, University of Toronto. So yes, there are queues in front of ski lifts. If you try to ski in the past or you are a fan of skiing, you're probably very familiar with that. And of course, customers do not like to wait. Waiting means less skiing time. So what can we do about that? One possible option is to increase capacity, to have more lifts, more spaces per lift. Nice idea, but actually this is not the kind of things that we are considering when we're talking about operations management. So operations management is all about efficiency. It's all about taking the resources, whatever you have right now, and just rethink about it and work with what you have, okay? So we are not jumping into a recommendation such as increase your capacity. That's not what we are doing in operations. So what can we do instead? So we can think about limiting admission, which might be a good idea to reduce waiting time, but it's actually not a good idea when we think about revenue. And this is what we are going to do here. We're going to maximize revenue. So there's another option, and this is the option that we are going to introduce here, prioritize customers. We can think about ski resorts. We can also think about amusement parks with respect to prioritizing customers. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Canada's Wonderland. Back in Canada, it was, when I was in Canada during my postdoc, it was the biggest, still is probably the biggest amusement park in Canada. So Canada's Wonderland, as other parks, I'm sure, offer early admission for customers who have a subscription. So if you have a subscription, you can enjoy the park earlier in the morning with much shorter queues. Other familiar options are those fast passes in Universal and also Disney parks. They offer the fast pass, you buy it and you skip the lines. There are other parks like the Efteling in the Netherlands that don't offer anything. Everybody has to buy the same ticket. There are no subscriptions. Of course, there are no fast pass, nothing. You have to stand in line like everybody else. And as a Dutch person, I must say it's very, very Dutch of them to do that. So, but I just want to say one more thing. I hope I'll convince you that there's a reason why they're doing that at the end. So here's to our model. Think about this ski resort that we have here in the picture. And near to the ski resort, there's a small village or a village with locals. And these locals love to ski. So they come to the mountain to ski. But they are not the only ones. There are also the aways. And these aways, they fly in and they also want to enjoy skiing. And they come to the mountain as well. Now, the only assumption that we are making about those two types of customers, again, two types, is that the locals are heavier users than the aways. So they come more often to the ski resorts than the aways. And this is our manager, the provider manager, a service provider here. And she thinks what to do. So which customers to serve, both types, maybe just one of the types, what prices to set, and should I offer priorities to customers, and if then, to whom? So how do we price the tickets? That's the first thing that we need to think about. So we know from the literature, and you are probably also familiar from real life, real business problems and the way we solve problems in business and we price our services, is that we tend to do price differentiation to maximize revenue. And this is also what we are going to do here. So given that we are doing this price differentiation, we are going to have two types of tickets, the per-use tickets that are targeted for the aways, and the subscriptions that are targeted for the locals. And there's a problem with that. The problem is that we are not always doing the pricing correctly. And I can show you two examples. Maybe you'll think that that's okay, but it might be a problem. So two examples from here, from Rochester, one from Seabreeze. Seabreeze priced this past summer, a single entrance for $34 and a season pass for $99. So 3 times the single entrance gives you a season pass. So if you come more than 3 times or even 3 times, you might consider buy the subscription. Same with the Strong Museum of Play. They offer a single entrance for $18 and then a season pass for 2 adults plus up to 4 children for $149. So even a family with 2 adults and 2 children, it pays off to buy the season pass if you're planning to go 2 times or more. So what are we going to do with that? What is going to be the solution, and how can we still price differentiate and maximize revenue? The solution that we are offering is to raise the subscription price for the locals by prioritizing them. So many times we are thinking about prioritizing customers as some kind of a perk that we give to customers. Here we are actually using this tool of prioritizing customers as a lever to increase the price of the subscription. They're basically paying for the fact that we are give them priorities in the queue. They're paying for these fast passes. And because of that, we create this differentiation between the prices and we can maximize our revenue. So if we look at capacity and how much capacity do we have, the solution depends on the capacity. If you have relatively low capacity, which means that compared to your resources, you have very large demand. In this case, it's better just to serve the high value customers that are the aways here, and you just serve them exclusively. The other case is when you have high capacity. In this case, you want to serve both types of customers and prioritize the low value customers. So now if we go back to that amusement park examples. So think about the Efteling. I think they are here. So I think they have relatively low resources compared to the huge demand that they have. And this is why they don't even need to think about differentiating prices. They just can sell the per-use tickets to everyone. Does it increase revenue? That's the next question. So I'm just going to show you a numerical example. These numerical examples looks at the difference between the case where we prioritize our customers and the case where we price correctly, but we're just going to serve customers first in, first out, okay, or first come, first serve. As you can see here, we can lose up to 7.5% of revenue. So we can increase the revenue by 75% to be more precise. We can increase the revenue by 7.5% if we use priorities in this example. So if you don't want to leave money on the table, consider prioritizing your customers. And this is actually something that is already happening. So these, I couldn't share these examples in the past because they weren't exist, but now they do. So Snowbird Ski Resort in Utah, a huge ski resort, a very popular one, is now offering fast tracks, express lanes for its customers. Same with Copper Mountain in Colorado, also offer fast tracks, new express lift lines for customers. So with that in mind, again, if you're interested, there's a paper. This one is in operations research. That's the one from 2019. you are welcome to read it. And I'm going to stop here because I see that there are many questions coming up. So I'll be happy to answer. Yes, Alex.
Perfect, Professor. So I'll go through a few now, and then we can wait for Q&A to answer a few others.
Yes.
So I think one question from Pete, it says, I'm looking forward to hearing about the Snowbird case because prioritizing some skiers means a decreased experience or fairness to those who don't purchase, I guess, the prioritization. And I think he was looking for your opinion on how to manage that fairness.
Yes, it's prioritizing customer it's not fair for the customers that are left behind, of course. But what we are trying to do here is to maximize revenue and to prioritize those customers that are the heavier users of our service. And as I said, they are going to enjoy these express lines, and they are paying for it. So it doesn't come for free. So when you think about it, and those customers who are just enjoying your ski resort for a very short time, they won't consider buying it because it's going to be too expensive for them, and they will see the difference, yes, because of that. So I'm not talking about fairness when I'm talking about maximizing revenue. I'm talking about fairness when I'm talking about maximizing social welfare, when I have a public provider that needs to consider and to take care of all its customers. Yes, I hope it helps.
Let me go through a few other ones. Give me 1 second. So just gonna wait for the end. So I'm trying to find one. I think this is particularly relevant for ski resorts. The attendee, it doesn't populate the name. So if this is your question, you know who you are. It says, are your local customers just heavier users on a person-by-person basis? Or are they a higher proportion of locals to tourists? When you had mentioned different pricing mechanisms for tourists versus locals?
Right, I agree. So first of all, I really just gave you the highlights of the model and the idea behind it. I didn't go into details too much, but of course, yes, the solution is sensitive to the number of, or the ratio between the customers that you have, the type of customers, or the number or the demand of each type. Of course, it's sensitive to that. And of course, it's sensitive to other dimensions and to other things that we can consider here. But the bottom line is, again, depends on your capacity and depends on how much resources you have to spare and to serve your customers. And the solution would depend mostly on that. So that's what I was trying to do here. If you want to go to more details, I think it's a talk that I gave for 19 minutes. I was trying, to shorten it to like 15 minutes, so we can talk about it forever. There are other things to consider here. Yes, we can read the paper and we can talk about it more maybe offline, if you're interested.
Perfect. So there are a lot of other questions. What I'll do is I'll let you continue, and then when we have the Q&A session, I would just run through all of those.
Perfect. Let's continue then.
Fantastic. Please keep the questions coming.
Thanks. Okay, so the last topic that I'm going to discuss, or the third question, is ride solo or pool on designing ride-sharing price service menus. And this is a joint work with a former PhD student of mine, Jagan Jacob, who is now an assistant professor at Xavier University. So you are probably all familiar with Uber and Lyft and their services, but still, just in case you are considering what I'm talking about. So here is the solo ride. So when we have solo rides, we have two customers here, and they both request a ride, and each one of them gets a car, and the car drives them to their destination. With a pooled ride, it's going to be different because we are just going to have one car that is going to pick up the first customer and then the second customer, and then drop them off in the different locations. So this is the pool ride option. what is the advantage of pooling? So first of all, it's cheaper, right? Or maybe most of all, it's cheaper. As you can see here, the difference between the prices. This is a snapshot of the Uber app. So you can see here that you pay only $3.75 for if you pool, and for the same trip, if you want to have your own car, you will pay almost double the price, or even more than double the price, actually. But there's also disadvantages, of course, and the main disadvantage is in time. So if you are considering traveling pool, your expected travel time would be much higher than if you are taking the car by yourself. So if you are asking for a solo ride, it takes longer, a little bit longer to arrive. There's also another type of cost that we can think of, which is the inconvenience cost. So you are going to share the space with another passenger. You don't know who it's going to be, how is this passenger going to behave. Maybe you don't feel like sharing your space with someone else, with a stranger. So keeping that in mind, we are going to ask the question of under what conditions can the ride-sharing provider benefit from offering the option to pool? And we are going to consider the following the following parts that are making decisions in this model. So the first is the ride-sharing provider. You'll see from time to time, I'm going to call him RSP. So he's the ride-sharing provider. Making a decision which prices and menus to offer. We have the passengers and we have the drivers. Now, I just want to say about this work that it has so many in it, and I really just try to give you the highlights here. So there are so many details that I'm just going to omit from the talk because we don't have time. So if you're interested, again, we can talk for another hour just about this topic. We are going to simplify here as well. So to simplify this entire situation, we are just going to consider one popular route. Think about taking an Uber from the airport to the city. So one popular route. What are we having here? What is the model? So as we said, there is the ride-sharing provider that chooses a revenue maximizing strategy, which consists of prices and services. And by services, we mean pool or solo services. The passengers, we are going to have two types of passengers again, high and low willingness to pay. So they differ by the willingness to pay for the service. And they choose whether to ride solo, whether to ride pool, or maybe not to ride at all. The drivers are also part of this problem, and they choose whether to drive. So they don't have to join the platform, they don't have to drive for the platform, and they are going to make their own decision, which makes everything very complicated because we have to consider at the same time the decision of so many different parts. Okay, so let's understand what is the traveling process that we are considering here. So we start with a request. The request arrives and we ask whether it's a pool request or not. And we'll start from the simple case where no, it's not a pool request, so it's a solo request. If there's a car, and then we ask if there's a car available. In our model, if there's no car available, like by the way, with Uber and Lyft and so on, we will reject the customer. So customers will see a message saying, sorry, we don't have car availables right now. But if there is a car available, then this passenger is going to travel alone and he's going to pay a price for a solo ride and drive, and the ride will take him a time of a solo ride, So that's the case for the simple solo ride. What about the pool ride? So now when the request arrives and we ask whether it's pool, the answer is yes. Now we have another question to ask. Is there another pool passenger waiting? If the answer is yes, then this passenger will join the other passenger. They will share the ride. Both will pay a price that is lower than the price that they would have paid for a solo ride. and the ride time would be higher. What if there is no passenger waiting? Then we are going to ask if there's a car available. If not, then we are rejecting this passenger. But if there is a car available, we are going to give the car to this passenger, and then the passenger is going to wait for a short period of time, finite period of time, so a short time, just to see if there's a match. Okay, so we're going to check if there's another passenger around at the airport looking for a ride to the city, and if there is, they will ride together, and each of them is going to pay the lower price and have a longer ride. But it might be the case that we can't find a match for this ride, and in this case, this passenger is going to travel alone. Still, he's going to pay the lower price because this is what we promised to him when we offered the pool ride. But his ride time is going to be shorter because it's going to be the same as with the solo ride, with plus this T, which is the time he waited for the match that didn't come up. Okay, so that's the process. It's a little bit complicated, but I think it makes sense. What do we find? So after considering, analyzing all this process and analyzing the decision of the ride-sharing provider, here is what we come up with. So this graph that you see here has two axes. The first axis, the x-axis, has the average number of high-type passengers. And the y-axis is the average number of low-type passengers. Okay, so the answer depends on how many customers we have on average from each type, which is, I think, I was asked about that in the previous, in the questions that were asked before. So here you see, yes, it depends on the demand from each type, each type. Yes. So what do we see here? We see 5 options. Option number 1 is offer only solo. Option number 2 is offer only pool. These 2 options can be with either a low price or a high price. And it depends on the demand. Okay, so if we have many low type passengers or more low type passengers than high type passengers, we are going to offer at the beginning just a solo ride. And then if we have many of them, we are just going to offer pool rides with a low price. We're going to stuff more passengers into cars. If we have more high type passengers, the willingness to pay is higher, we are going to offer the same thing, but just with higher prices. What is interesting is this area here in between, where we offer both solo and pool rides. And you can see that this area happens, or this solution happens, when the population is not skewed. So when we have approximately a balanced case where we have about the same number of customers from each type. So in this case, it's optimal to offer both solo and pool rides. So what I'm showing you here is an optimal solution. It doesn't mean that this is what the ride-sharing providers that we are familiar with are doing, but this is the optimal solution that we come up with. Revenue, what is happening with revenue? So this is also a bit complicated to explain. I'll just say that it depends on the potential market size. As we have as the potential market size increases, revenue will increase until we get to the point where we are now having too many customers. They are starting to be rejected very often. The willingness to pay may be now lower, and therefore our revenue is going to decrease. And if we look at this figure here, it's the revenue per driver. So we are considering also the driver's problem. So when drivers start to decide whether to join the platform or not, at the beginning, we can show that when the demand is not that high and these drivers are encouraged to join, yes, they will make money, but at the beginning, as they join, the revenue per driver is actually going to decrease, and at some point it's going to increase. So again, I can't give you too many details about that. There's a lot of math in the background here that I don't have time to go into. I just want to show you one more thing about it. We took our model and we tried to validate it with real data. So we have real data, ride-sharing data that was collected by the city of Chicago. It contains information about 475,000 solo rides and 158,000 pool rides. Taking that data, we could calculate the parameters that we use in our model. For example, we calculated the average price and the average length of ride for solo and pool ride. And you see that it's consistent with what we said. Solo ride costs more, but pool ride takes longer time. So taking that into consideration, we also looked at the different types because we assume different types. So here what we have is hardship. And we can see from the data that when hardship is low, meaning our customers are wealthier, their willingness to pay is higher for the solo ride and also for the pool ride. And also when we take the ratio in between the two, we get that the willingness to pay is higher for those who are more wealthier. And when we analyze it and we try to validate the model, we came up to the conclusion that given this passenger heterogeneity, we can explain why in Chicago those ride-sharing providers offer both solo and pool rides. So that's what we did here, just trying to explain why and when should we consider offering this extra type of service. Again, paper, if you want to read more, this paper is already published in the European Journal of Operational Research, and you are welcome to read and to ask more questions. So I'm just going to conclude and then I'm going to go directly to the questions. So we looked at differentiated services and we wanted to use them to increase social welfare and revenue. And what we show that is that when offering an expedited service, it is possible to allocate resources such that all customers are better off. When we talk about priorities, we can use them not just as a perk, but also as a tool for increasing revenue. And when we are considering offering quality differentiated services, we can increase the revenue if our customers are differ with respect to their willingness to pay. So I'll stop here. We have a few more minutes. I'll be happy to hear your questions. Yes,
perfect. It's wonderful. So I'll jump in. There are actually quite a few. So we may not have time to get to all of them, but I'll go through some of the more common ones. So one of the questions...
While you're asking, let me just say, if you're interested, I'll be happy to answer also via email. So please email me. I'll be happy to take your questions. Yes, please, sorry.
Wonderful. Okay, so one of the questions is, given the difference between PreCheck, Clear, and some of these other services, Ilmar asked, what is the role of services like Clear that offer an expedited option that accelerates both PreCheck and regular TSA? Does that create a new category of customers who receive an incremental utility because there's another service type that's helping reduce the queue?
Right, there's that Clear. I think you are right referring to the Clear option. There are new options now. Yes, they do help, and we can have the same type of result. Okay, so the idea, the insights do not change if we add more complexity to the model. So if we add more levels of service, more expedited service, or maybe we add even more types of flyers, that's also okay. We can distinguish between more types of flyers. That won't change the main insight, which is that expedited service can be used to increase overall social welfare, and that we can make it fair by increasing efficiency of our service. Yes.
Perfect. I'm just scrolling through to see. Okay, so there's a question that is a follow-on to this from Steve, and it says, is there modeling when there's a secondary queue involved, such as a tier 1 customer support, and let's say tier 2 or tier 3, so similar to different queues, you want to maximize the cost to tier 2 and 3 employees. And it says, I would expect there is a higher risk of abandonment. So I think the question is, what factors do you consider in optimizing a multi-level queue system to reduce the risk of abandonment in different queues?
Oh, abandonment is a completely different story, okay? So we are actually not considered here, so we are talking about a pre-check still, right? So for the pre-check example, we do not consider abandonment. You cannot abandon the security check line. Right?
Yes, I think this has moved on to sort of a more of a business customer support.
Business customer,
question, yes.
That's a very interesting question. It's a completely different question. I don't think it was considered yet with considering strategic customers. So you have to understand there's a lot of literature about queuing models and about businesses that use a queuing or have this waiting component in them. There's not much literature that also consider the behavior of customers at the same time, and building a mathematical model that is also considering behavior of customers is very, very complicated. And I think there are many open questions still to be researched, still to be analyzed. And I think that's a very interesting question. I'm not familiar with the paper that already dealt with that. Maybe we should, yes.
Fantastic, great. And then I think there is, let me see how much time we have. Maybe we'll go through one more question, which I think this goes to use cases, and I think you just touched on this. Do we have use cases for queuing in sort of service industries like consultant, project-based organizations, or any other ways where this would be applicable?
So we are talking about queuing in general or about specific?
So it says queuing, which I think it means queuing and prioritizing.
Prioritizing customers? Yes, of course. So we know from the literature and we know from life that usually we use priorities or priority queues when we have customers that differ with respect to their cost of waiting. So think about customers that are value their time more, or they are more busy than others. Then we prioritize them, like, you know, VIP customers and so on. So we know that from the literature. What we were trying to do here in this work that I presented is also to consider the case where actually customers don't differ by their cost of waiting or by the way they value their time, but they differ by their usage of the system. So either they are heavier usage, they are heavier customers, or lighter. So it depends on how many times they use the system. Based on that, we are going to prioritize them. So that's the interesting part. We are also sometimes thinking about, you know, prioritize those customers who value your service more. We show here in this paper that I presented that it's not about valuing the service more. You can value the service more as an away skier, right? When you come to the ski resort, you want to enjoy it as much as you can. You are going to ski no matter what the conditions are going to be. So maybe you value it even more than a local that can come tomorrow if the weather is not that great. That's not about it. It's about how many times you are actually going to use the service, and how can I use priorities to increase my revenue. So I'm not sure if this answered the question, but yes, prioritizing customers can help in many, many cases, not just for revenue, also for social welfare in some cases. Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. We won't get to all the questions, but a general question that repeats a lot is fairness. I think a lot of people say, you know, I think with more resources, you have access to more, and less resources, somehow you get deprioritized. And so I think fairness has been a big part of the question. So I'll share those with you.
Yes, that would be great. Fairness is a great question, and that, again, wasn't explored enough in the literature. People, faculty, professors, I don't know, they're trying to avoid this question because it can it can be, I don't know, maybe politically incorrect or inappropriate, but I think it's very important to think about those customers that are left behind. And in this work, this is exactly what we're trying to do. We are trying to make sure that everybody are better off by this new service that we added.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Professor Roet-Green.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Yes, thank you to my fellow alumni, current students, prospective students, professors for joining us today. The Simon Alumni Board looks forward to partnering with you to make Simon even better. So we welcome your suggestions for future expert insights. And we hope this session made you feel Simon proud. So until the next expert insights, stay well and have a nice day.
Bye-bye, thank you.